Research log. Earth date. The 12th of April 2157. Chief Medical Researcher Dr. Pextil, Galactic Science Division. When the Galactic Council tasked me with studying the medical resilience of the newly discovered human species, I expected a routine assignment. After all, I documented the physiological responses of 37 different sentient species. How different could these humans be? I realize now that question makes me sound like an absolute fool. My first day on Earth started normally enough. We'd established our cloaked observation post near something humans call a construction site, a place where they deliberately modify their environment using primitive mechanical tools and questionable safety protocols. The perfect location to document typical injury responses. I'd barely calibrated my bioscanner when it happened. A human male, later identified as Dave Peterson, age 34, lost his footing on an elevated platform. My assistants and I watched in horror as he plummeted 30 feet, bounced off 2 metal beams, and landed in a pile of debris. According to every medical text in the galaxy, this should have been my first documented human fatality. Instead, Dave stood up, brushed dust off his strange protective garment, something called overalls, and shouted up to his colleagues, "I'm okay. But somebody owes me a beer for that one." His coworkers laughed. They laughed, as if watching a member of their species survive a lethal fall was somehow amusing. I frantically checked my instruments. Surely they were malfunctioning. But no, they showed multiple impact traumas, minor skeletal stress fractures, and soft tissue damage that would have liquidated the internal organs of any rational species. Yet there was Dave, arguing with his site supervisor about whether this qualified as his lunch break. "You should probably get checked out," the supervisor said, showing the first signs of sensible concern I'd witnessed. Dave waved him off. "Nah, just need an ice pack and some aspirin. Had worse falling out of bed." This statement sent me into such a state of scientific distress that my assistant, Krill, had to remind me to breathe. These humans routinely survived injuries while unconscious? In their sleep cycles? How had they not gone extinct? I spent the rest of that day documenting Dave's recovery. He refused proper medical attention, a behavioral pattern I would become distressingly familiar with, instead applying something called a Band-Aid to a minor laceration and continuing his work. By end of shift, he showed no signs of physical distress beyond what he called being a bit sore. That evening, I submitted my first report to the Galactic Council. It consisted of 2 sentences. Preliminary observation suggests humans possess unprecedented physical resilience beyond all known biological parameters. Request immediate research extension and additional funding for what may be the most important xenobiological study in medical history. I also attached a personal note. "And please send more anti-anxiety medication. I have a feeling I'm going to need it." If only I'd known that Dave's miraculous survival was just the beginning of my scientific crisis. The humans, it turned out, were just warming up. Research log. Earth. Date the 19th of April 2157. Chief Medical Researcher Dr. Pextil, Galactic Science Division. I've spent the past week trying to make sense of human medical records, and I'm beginning to question either my sanity or the fundamental laws of biology. Possibly both. My research team has established a monitoring station near what humans call a skate park, apparently a designated area where young humans deliberately throw themselves into the air while riding primitive wheeled devices. The level of voluntary risk-taking is concerning. Today I met Max Rodriguez, age 15, who has become the bane of my statistical analysis. According to their medical records, which I initially assumed were fabricated, Max had broken the same arm 3 times. Suffered 14 concussions, dislocated both shoulders multiple times, cracked 6 ribs, and somehow survived something called a failed triple kickflip into the halfpipe. When I ran these numbers through our medical probability software, it crashed, not figuratively. The quantum computer literally refused to process the statistical impossibility of a single organism surviving this much trauma. I watched Max attempt another dangerous maneuver today. They fell, skidded across concrete at a speed that should have removed several layers of epidermis, then jumped up shouting, "That was AWISM." Their friends cheered and recorded the incident on primitive digital devices, presumably to document the tragedy. Except they called it totally sick footage, bro. I'm beginning to suspect humans have a fundamentally different definition of sick than the rest of the galaxy. My assistant Krill suggested that perhaps Max was an anomaly, some kind of genetic outlier. This theory lasted approximately 2 hours until we expanded our research to the general population of what humans call extreme sports enthusiasts. The results were distressing. Consider the following transcript from a nearby medical facility. Nurse: how did this happen? Nurse: how did this happen? Patient: tried to backflip my dirt bike over my cousin's pool. Nurse: why? Patient: it was his birthday. Nurse: you have 3 broken ribs. Patient: yeah, but you should see the video. It got like 10K likes. I had to look up what likes meant. Apparently, humans have developed a social reward system for surviving near-fatal experiences. This explains so much, yet simultaneously raises so many more questions. Today I also learned about something humans call "hold my beer and watch this," a ritual phrase that apparently precedes many of their most catastrophically ill-advised decisions. I've instructed my team to begin recording whenever they hear these words. The resulting footage will either revolutionize our understanding of xenobiology or serve as evidence at my eventual psychiatric evaluation. The most troubling part? These injuries aren't even considered severe by human standards. When I showed my findings to a local medical professional, Dr. Thompson, she just laughed and said, "Oh, you should see what comes through the ER on full moons." I don't know what Earth's satellite has to do with injury rates, but at this point, I'm afraid to ask. My revised report to the Galactic Council now includes a request for a team of theoretical physicists. Clearly, humans are operating under a different set of natural laws than the rest of the universe. Either that, or they're simply ignoring the ones we've got. End log entry. P.S. Max attempted another triple kickflip while I was writing this. They're fine. The laws of physics are crying. Research log. Earth date: the 26th of April, 2157. Chief Medical Researcher Dr. Pextill, Galactic Science Division. Today I discovered something that makes human injury resistance seem almost logical by comparison. These beings willingly consume poison. For pleasure. Multiple times per day. They call it coffee. My first encounter with this substance occurred at a local dispensary called The Daily Grind, where I witnessed a human female, Joy Martinez, a barista and unwitting subject of my growing scientific horror, consume something called a quad-shot espresso. Initial scans indicated levels of caffeine that would stop the hearts of 3 Centaurian elk. Joy's only response was to complain that it wasn't strong enough. I immediately dispatched Krill to alert the local authorities about this obvious attempt at self-harm. This proved embarrassing. "Ma'am," the police officer said, trying not to laugh, "drinking coffee isn't a crime, though charging 6 credits for a pumpkin spice latte probably should be." Further investigation revealed that humans not only tolerate this toxin, but have built an entire culture around its consumption. They drink it hot enough to damage tissue. They drink it cold. They add sugar, another substance that should be lethal in the quantities they consume. Some even drink it with something called sugar-free sweetener, which is just. I don't even have words for that level of chemical madness. When I expressed my concerns to Joy about her caffeine intake, she just smiled and said, "Oh, this is nothing. You should see me during finals week. I once stayed awake for 3 days straight on nothing but Red Bull and Spite." I had to look up Red Bull. The contents of that particular beverage have been added to my ongoing list titled, "Things that should have killed this species, but somehow haven't." My team attempted an intervention when we discovered humans also regularly consume ethanol, they call it alcohol, and apparently consider it a crucial component of social interaction. We set up an information booth warning about the dangers of voluntary toxin consumption. The results were not what we expected. Actual responses from humans included, "Yeah, but have you tried it with chocolate? I can quit anytime I want. I just don't want to. Listen, buddy, I haven't had my morning coffee yet, so this isn't a good time." And my personal favorite, "Without coffee, I'm literally dead inside." This last statement caused significant confusion among my research team, who spent 3 hours trying to understand how humans could be simultaneously deceased and ambulatory. I had to explain that it was hyperbole, though given everything else we've learned about human physiology, I'm only about 60% certain of that. The situation reached its peak when we discovered the existence of energy drinks. The sheer quantity of stimulants, sugars, and unknown chemical compounds in these beverages would qualify them as weapons of mass destruction on most civilized worlds. Humans drink them for breakfast. I observed a human construction worker, our old friend Dave from the falling incident, consume 3 of these beverages in rapid succession, then proceed to operate heavy machinery while commenting that he felt a bit jittery. A bit jittery. His heart rate was comparable to a quantum oscillator, and he described it as A bit jittery. I've had to revise my working theory about humans yet again. They're not merely resistant to physical trauma. They appear to actively seek out substances that should kill them, then utilize these poisons as performance enhancers. It's like watching a species weaponize their own poor judgment. The Council has responded to my latest report with a single question. Are you sure your testing equipment isn't malfunctioning? I wish it was. That would be so much easier to explain than the reality that I'm documenting a species that treats potentially lethal substances the way most species treat vitamin supplements. End log entry. P.S. Joy just offered me something called a Death Wish coffee. The name alone violates 3 different galactic safety protocols. I'm starting to think humans name their beverages based on what they're supposed to do to other species. Research log. Earth date the 3rd of May, 2157. Chief Medical Researcher Dr. Pextill, Galactic Science Division. Today I experienced what humans call a nervous breakdown. This occurred after witnessing an incident at our research facility that has fundamentally shattered my understanding of xenobiology, physics, and possibly reality itself. It began when our cloaking generator malfunctioned. This should have been a minor inconvenience, the kind of technical problem that requires a simple repair crew. We contacted a local maintenance company, carefully disguising our facility as a tech startup. Apparently humans will believe anything if you claim it's a startup. The repair team arrived. 3 humans including, to my growing concern, our frequent research subject Dave. He took one look at our quantum stabilizer and said those words I've come to dread. Hold my coffee, this'll be interesting. What followed can only be described as a cascading series of catastrophes. The stabilizer overloaded, creating a localized gravity fluctuation. Tools went flying. Equipment worth more than most planetary GDPs started sparking. And Dave, instead of running away like any sane being, decided to climb into the machinery. Just gotta bypass the flux capacitor, he said, using terminology that I'm certain he made up on the spot. Then it happened. A power surge sent approximately 40,000 volts through the system. Every safety protocol we had failed simultaneously. Dave was caught in the discharge. According to our medical scanners, he experienced electrical burns across 30% of his body, temporary cardiac arrhythmia, minor radiation exposure, gravitational shear that briefly made him experience time 0.2 seconds faster than the rest of the universe. His response? Wow, that tingled. Anybody got some aspirin? I began screaming. Not professionally, not as a scientist, just straight up screaming. Are you okay? Dave asked me. He asked me if I was okay. The human who had just violated several laws of physics and should, by all medical science, be extremely dead, was concerned about my mental state. That's when Helen Martinez showed up. She's the administrator at the local hospital, and as I learned, Dave's sister-in-law. Apparently, she follows his repair crew with a medical kit because, in her words, it's easier than waiting for him to admit he needs to go to the ER. While treating Dave's injuries, which he insisted were just a few scratches despite his hair still being electrically charged enough to make it stand up, Helen shared some statistics about human workplace accidents that made me question everything I know about evolutionary survival traits. Last year, she said, casually applying burn cream to Dave's remarkably not dead body, we had a guy come in who'd been shot with a nail gun 6 times. He drove himself to the hospital because he didn't want to pay for an ambulance. Finished his shift first, too. I asked her how humans survive such things. Her response, spite mostly, that and really good workers' comp insurance. The gravity of the situation finally hit me when I realized our quantum stabilizer was actually working better after Dave's repairs. He had somehow fixed highly advanced alien technology while being electrocuted, irradiated, and temporarily phase-shifted out of normal space-time. I've submitted my resignation to the Galactic Council 3 times today. They keep sending it back with notes like, this data is too important, and please stop having existential crises in official documentation. But how can I not have an existential crisis? I've just watched a human treat near death by quantum mechanics, as if it were a mild inconvenience. This goes beyond mere physical resilience. They're not just surviving things that should kill them. They're treating potentially lethal situations as routine occupational hazards. End log entry. P.S. Dave left his coffee behind. Krill analyzed it. The caffeine content alone should have counteracted the cardiac arrhythmia. I'm beginning to suspect humans don't just ignore the laws of physics, they actively negotiate with them. Research log. Earth date. The 10th of May 2157. Chief Medical Researcher Dr. Pextil, Galactic Science Division. Today I finally understood. It wasn't a single revelation, more like several horrifying realizations hitting me all at once while I reviewed our research data. It started when Helen stopped by our startup to check on Dave. She's made it her personal mission to ensure he hasn't done anything too Dave-like since the quantum incident. I mentioned my ongoing confusion about human durability, and she suggested I talk to Dr. Marcus Chen, a paleontologist at the local university. "You want to understand why humans are hard to kill?" Dr. Chen said, spreading out various fossil records. "Look at what tried to kill us." That's when it hit me. Every other species in the galaxy evolved on worlds that made sense. Peaceful worlds. Logical worlds. Earth, by comparison, is what you'd get if you asked a particularly malicious cosmic entity to design a death planet. Consider the evidence. Their planet randomly spawns enormous atmospheric pressure differentials. They call them storms, that can throw buildings through the air. The ground occasionally splits open and spews molten rock. Massive waves of dihydrogen monoxide periodically sweep away entire cities. The very air is seasonally filled with reproductive particles that cause uncontrollable immune responses. Everything is constantly trying to eat everything else. There are bears. And that's just the natural stuff, Dr. Chen continued, pulling up historical records. "You should see what we did to ourselves." The timeline of human history reads like a chronicle of increasingly creative ways to court death. They discovered fire, which should have ended them, and thought, "Let's cook with it." They found toxic plants and decided to categorize them through trial and error, emphasis on error. They looked at clearly dangerous animals and thought, "I bet we can domesticate that." But the really interesting part, Dr. Chen said, pulling up genetic data, is what all this did to our evolution. That's when everything clicked. Humans aren't inexplicably durable, they're exactly as durable as they need to be. Their entire evolutionary history is just their species repeatedly saying no to extinction-level events. Their healing factor? Developed because they kept getting injured but refused to die. Their poison resistance? Because they wouldn't stop eating things that should have killed them. Their bone density? Because they kept falling out of trees, and later, because they invented new heights to fall from. Even their social structures reflect this. Most species developed cooperation out of simple evolutionary advantage. Humans developed it because they looked at things that could easily kill them and said, "Bet we could take that if we work together." I shared this theory with Max, our teenage skateboarding subject, who was in the hospital with yet another broken arm. Their response was illuminating. "Oh yeah, humans are totally metal. Like, everything tried to kill us, so we just got really good at not dying. It's like when you wipe out hard on a trick. Either you learn to fall better, or you stop skating. And humans? We just kept skating." The metaphor is questionable, but the principle is sound. Humans didn't just survive their death world, they thrived on it. They turned the very things that should have killed them into advantages. Even their scientific method is basically poke it and see if it pokes back. I've started reviewing our earlier data in this context, and everything makes more sense. Dave's survival of multiple fatal accidents? Standard human adaptability. Joy's caffeine tolerance? Evolved poison resistance. The entire concept of extreme sports? They're actually training to maintain their survival skills. Their medical technology? Largely focused on keeping them alive long enough for their frankly ridiculous healing factor to kick in. The most terrifying part? They're still evolving. Still adapting. Every time something new tries to kill them, they seem to take it as a personal challenge. I've updated my report to the Council with this new understanding, along with a strong recommendation that we never, under any circumstances, attempt to invade Earth. Not because humans are particularly dangerous, but because they'd probably survive it, adapt to it, and then ask to do it again because it was fun. End log entry. P.S. Dr. Chen invited me to something called a barbecue. Apparently, humans celebrate their mastery over death by deliberately setting food on fire and gathering around it socially. I'm both horrified and intrigued. Research log, Earth date, the 17th of May 2157. Chief Medical Researcher Dr. Pextil, Galactic Science Division. Final report on Human Durability Study. 2. The Galactic Council. Humans. Classification. Approach with caution and snacks. Distinguished Council members. After extensive research, multiple existential crises, and one particularly enlightening barbecue, I can now present my final conclusions regarding human durability and their classification in galactic medical records. First, I must apologize for my earlier reports, which the Council described as increasingly hysterical. In my defense, I had just watched a human, Dave, again accidentally set himself on fire and respond by saying, "This is fine," while calmly walking to the nearest water source. The hysteria was warranted. My recommendations are as follows. Medical classification. Humans should be classified as paradoxically durable. They are simultaneously extremely fragile. Their skin can be damaged by something as simple as folded paper, and inexplicably resilient. They can survive events that would reduce most species to their component atoms. Emergency response protocols. When treating human injuries, medical personnel should be aware that human pain responses are wildly unreliable. They will consistently underreport injury severity. The phrase, "I'm fine," should be treated as a warning sign. Walking it off is not, contrary to human belief, a legitimate medical treatment. Safety protocols. Don't bother. They'll find a way around them. One of our subjects, Max, responded to a "do not enter" sign by saying, "You're not my dad," and proceeding to do exactly what the sign prohibited. They survived, of course. Diplomatic considerations. When dealing with humans, it's important to remember that their response to nearly any situation is influenced by the fact that they evolved on a planet that regularly tries to kill them. This explains their bizarre habits of greeting potential threats with curiosity rather than fear, treating near-death experiences as entertainment, developing recreational activities around survival skills, finding humor in situations that should be traumatic. Cultural notes. Humans have developed entire industries around voluntarily experiencing controlled dangers. They call this entertainment or sports, or sometimes Monday. This should not be discouraged, as it appears to be a crucial part of their ongoing evolution. Personal addendum. During my final week of research, I decided to attempt understanding humans through direct experience. I consumed a substance they call a ghost pepper hot sauce after being assured it was barely spicy. I now understand why humans have such high pain tolerance. I also understand why they invented ice cream. The experience was simultaneously horrible and enlightening, much like this entire research project. Final conclusions. Humans are not, as previously theorized, immune to death. They're simply really, really bad at dying. They've turned not dying into an art form, a science, and occasionally a competitive sport. As Joy explained to me while serving her 15-shot espresso creation, everything's trying to kill us all the time anyway, so we figured we might as well have fun with it. I believe this quote perfectly encapsulates the human approach to existence. Recommendation for future research. Send someone else. I'm retiring to a nice, safe desk job where nothing unexpected happens and no one survives things that violate the laws of physics. Though I must admit, I'm going to miss these terrifyingly wonderful beings. They've taught me that the impossible is more of a guideline than a rule, and that any situation, no matter how dire, can be improved with either coffee or ice cream. Sometimes both. End final log entry. P.S. Dave just messaged me about another repair job. Apparently, something's wrong with their nuclear power plant. I'm choosing to end my research before I witness humans casually surviving atomic radiation. There's only so much my scientific worldview can take. PPS, update. He fixed it. With duct tape. I'm leaving now.